Good evening, everybody. Any members or officers in physical attendance with an electronic device should mute it to avoid feedback. Any remote participants, please keep your cameras and microphones off unless you wish to speak, and ideally do not use the camera facilities at all, as this can affect the quality of the IT connection. The meeting may be recorded, and data collected during the recording of the meeting will be retained in accordance with the Council's data retention policy. The recording of the meeting may be added to the Council websites. Members accessing the meeting remotely should use their Swale Borough Council or Kent County Council laptops to participate virtually. If you join using the link on the website or on a mobile and a tablet device, it may not always possibly identify you, and you may not be recorded as being in remote attendance. Welcome members, officers and any members of the public to the Licensing Committee meeting, including any visiting members and members of the public. Please note that the following changes in the political balance of the Council and membership of the Swale Independence Alliance Group since the agenda was published. Councillor Mike Last, Councillor Chris Palmer, Councillor Richard Palmer, there's one missing off of this. No? No longer sit on the Licensing Committee. There are currently 2 vacancies to be filled by the Swale Independent Alliance Group, as the Labour Group gifted a seat to the Swale Independence Alliance. Right. The following staff are in attendance: Contentious Lawyer Mid-Kent Legal, Helen Ward; Community Services Manager, Steph Curtis; Licensing Team Leader, Joe Thompson; Democratic Services, Kelly McKenzie. Are members all aware of the emergency evacuation procedure? There are no plans for evacuation, and if the alarm sounds, the Democratic Service Officer would direct us all tending safely out of the building into the car park. The list may not be used. Is there anyone in attendance with mobility issues? Please indicate now. No, you all look a fit lot. Are there any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies from Councillor Roger Clark, Councillor Rich Lehman, and his substitute is Councillor Terry Thompson, and Councillor Simon Clark, who is attending remotely. Thank you.
Thank you. Do members take the following meetings as a correct record? The minutes of the meeting held on the 24th of June 2024, minutes numbers 61 to 66, and accept the following meetings in the subcommittee meetings: 27th of November 2024, minutes numbers 390 and 394, 18th of December 2024, minutes numbers 518 to 522. Agreed. Thank you. I'll sign them later. Any declarations of interest? No. No one has registered to speak from the public. So I invite Jo to introduce her report.
Thank you. Good evening. The purpose of this report is firstly to seek members' approval of the new draft taxi policy to be put out to consultation for 12 weeks and then return to committee with the outcome of the consultation. Whilst it was intended that the current Swale taxi policy would run for 5-year duration from 2022 until the 31st of October 2027, there was a commitment to undertake a mid-term review. This review was delayed in June 2024, awaiting a steer from government on ultra-low emission vehicles. with no significant updates from government on this issue, and a substantial number of changes suggested by the Department of Transport Best Practice Guidance published in 2023, it was decided that a completely revised policy would be put forward to run from 2025 to 2030. Appendix 2, pages 109 to 121 of the agenda give details of the changes to the policy, and Appendix 3, pages 123 to 143 of the agenda show the recommendations outlined in the Department for Transport guidance and our responses to those recommendations. There are 3 major policy changes which will affect the trade. Number 1 is the introduction of disability training for drivers. The DFT guidance placed a requirement on all drivers to complete disability training. The licensing team felt that this should be included in the policy, as we need to be sure that we're doing all that we can to best assist people with disabilities. Number 2, the introduction of restricted private hire badges. Again, the guidance recommends the removal of the topographical element from the street knowledge test in the hope that it would encourage more people into the trade. The licensing team felt strongly that the topographical test should remain to help ensure the safety of both the travelling public and drivers. However, as a compromise in light of the guidance, we've included in the draft policy a new restricted private hire badge. If agreed, a restricted private hire badge will be used in conjunction with a new restricted private hire vehicle licence. Both licences would be issued for 1 year and would require the taxi operator to provide evidence of a KCC school run contract or specialist executive contract. Drivers applying for a restricted private hire badge would not be required to sit the topographical element of the street knowledge test. Number 3, vehicle age limits. The guidance recommended the removal of age limits for vehicles. The licensing team felt that in order to maintain the integrity of the taxi fleet, the age limits should remain as in the current policy, but that any requests for an extension to the age limits is considered on a case-by-case basis. With regards to the environmental considerations for vehicles and what date to mandate all newly licensed vehicles as ULEV, no changes have been made in this respect to the draft policy, and the deadlines remain the same as for the current policy, in that all vehicles from April 2027 should be ultra-low emissions. We are aware when this was included in the current policy, it raised concerns from the taxi trade and proposed that any relevant evidence supplied following the public consultation be presented to members to consider whether the deadlines should be revised. The full 12-week consultation period will run between the 20th of February and the 22nd of May, with consultees being those details in the report on page 11 of your agenda. We will enter all incoming responses into a grid together with our responding comments and present our findings to a future meeting of this committee. This report also recommends that members consider an increase to the taxi tariff soilage charge to be included in public consultation for the annual increase in the tariff. The proposed soilage fee would be a maximum of £85. The current soilage fee being £50. This has been in place for more than 10 years and does not reflect present-day charges for valeting or loss of earnings for drivers and operators. Section 4 of this report, on page 10 of the agenda, outlines alternatives options should members decide the proposed draft taxi policy is not suitable and or members do not agree with the proposed increase in the soilage charge. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. I will now open up the debate.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I just had a question about the topographical test. How in-depth does this go? Are they required to remember every single road like they do in the knowledge, or what exactly are they required to know?
No, it's a multiple choice test. So there are other sections of the test that they have to answer, like numeracy, highway code, safeguarding. There are two parts to the topographical element. One is places. So I think there are, I can't remember the exact number, but there are between 5 and 10 questions on places within the borough. So they'll be given the name of a place and then they have to say where it is, and it's a multiple choice answer. And then there's another part which gives a route from one location to another, say the Sittingbourne station to the council offices, and there'll be 3 or 4 routes, and they have to say which one is the shortest route to that destination.
Okay, thank you. It doesn't really sound to me that this would really be that necessary. Given that sat-navs do exist, it does say here that when they drop out are unavailable. But first of all, that doesn't happen that often. Traffic jams, yes, looking for alternative routes, but it sounds like the test wouldn't help it that much.
I think that drivers would have to have knowledge of the area to get the answers correct, and they have to score quite highly. So out of the questions that there are 10 questions, they would have to get 8 out of the 10 correct. It does seem to make a difference, and we do get comments from drivers and operators that they would prefer to not to have it. I think the big issue for us is that if we remove that element, that there would be a move towards drivers just going for the private hire badge as opposed to the Hackney badge, and then we would have operators who couldn't get drivers for their vehicles because the majority of their fleet would be Hackney vehicles, and it could lead to a shortage of cars that are available for immediate hire, because obviously the private hire ones can't do that. They can't pick up from the ranks.
All right, thank you.
Councillor Moore.
Thank you. I've got a few points to make. I will state I was many years ago, or 4 or 5 years ago, involved within the taxi business, so I have a bit of knowledge on the business. So the environmental considerations, you're saying that all vehicles, now I know we want to be sort of net zero, and that needs to be as of the 1st of April 27. I think probably that would decline in the taxi companies, because not only are a lot of electric vehicles unaffordable for many, they are also, we haven't got the charging facilities for them, especially on the island. You know, if they're doing runs around the eastern end of the island, I don't know of an actual electric charging point on the eastern end of the island. And I can't see it happening in under 2 years, or just 2 years, that the sustainability for that. And the fact is that, you know, diesel and petrol cars are still going to be on sale until 2035. So why are we putting 2027 as a date for that when, you know, cars are going to be available until 2035 for that one? I'd be very concerned with a school run only licence, unless each car and licence is clearly visible as a school run only and not a magnetic plate, or it needs to be a fixed sign that is permanently on the vehicle, because you're opening up licensed drivers to take work without having the correct licence. And also, as for the topographical test, I think that has caused a lot of problems since the change in the topographical test and the new system, which is being used for it, because I know of 2 firms on the island that are registered with a northern borough because they can, and plate in their cars, to get around Swales testing and licensing laws. So there's a lot to be said on a lot of this policy. I agree with most of it, to be honest with you, but I think there is a lot that even before it needs to go to public consultation should be discussed either by this committee or worked on a little bit more, because I think you're opening up to a lot of comments from the businesses, also from the public as well. Thank you.
I think that is kind of the intention, really, to get those responses to the consultation, and you know, we intend to have meetings with the trade as well, so that we get their feedback and that can inform any amendments. With regards to the date for ULEVs, I mean, in the report there is quite a bit to do with how the concerns were about whether there was enough infrastructure, the price of the vehicles and things like that, and that really there doesn't seem to have been enough changes, enough improvements. So I would anticipate that we would get a lot of comments on that, and then that would maybe give us a steer on whether we push that date back. It's a bit of a balancing act, isn't it, really, in terms of what the council's environmental ambitions are, and getting that right. So I think the feedback from the trade will be really important on that, and we will, you know, obviously feed that back to committee, and then whether you then decide that date needs to be pushed back.
I can understand that, but are we not well, yeah, we're probably going to put it back anyway. Why are we not giving them that bit of breathing space? And I've read the report. I know in the report it says about the charging facilities and customers worrying whether they're going to get to and from destinations because... So why are we not changing it preemptively rather than waiting when we know it's not fit and it's not probably doable? Why are we leaving it and waiting for a load of comments about, you know, possible businesses going under? We know, and you even in your report says you know it's probably not feasible. Why are we not changing it?
I think we will get those kind of comments, but I think we're also hoping to get some more informed comments from the trade. I mean, they are the ones that are out there. They have probably a lot more knowledge than I have on the type of vehicles that they are purchasing and what's available and things like that. That is the hope.
And I suppose part of what we wanted to get from the debate tonight was actually if you guys as a committee do feel strongly about changing the date in the draft consultation that goes out, then that again completely is your committee right to do that. I think as Jo said, we just felt coming to the committee with the evidence from the consultation, assuming that is what they're going to come back with, would just strengthen the case because of the environmental concerns and environmental ambitions to change the date, where at this point we didn't feel we had the evidence to back up that date change yet. But equally, it's down to you guys as the committee tonight. If you would like to see that date change, then of course that's your prerogative. Did you want to come back on the other comments, Jo?
So the looking for the restricted private hire licence. I have got some information from Medway and Gravesham who've been doing this for quite some time, and it's been run successfully there. I think Medway have about 150 or something like that, like restricted private hire licences, and Gravesham's is a sort of like 29 or something like that. The idea is definitely that they would have to use a restricted private hire vehicle along with that driver, so that driver could not drive a normal private hire vehicle. The plates would be a different colour. I think we've suggested green, which is what they do at Medway and Gravesham, so that they are more distinctive. And we would have some sort of marking on the badge as well that linked with that, so that you could see that it was so with the hope that those would be used together and there wouldn't be any sort of issues with the driver being in the wrong vehicle.
And would we advertise the colour and the sort of badge specifics to the public so they know that if they see a car like that out and about, or they're offered to pick up? Because I'm just thinking of public safety, obviously, as well. And, you know, I think it's great because I know there isn't enough cabs for the school runs. Don't get me wrong, I know that. But I would also worry that we need to make sure as a council we are doing everything we can to not have drivers or vehicles being used for something it's not meant to be used for. So it need to be advertised to the public that in case because things happen and sometimes they think, oh, just once it'll be okay.
Yeah, it's a very valid point, and that is a good suggestion. It's something we could definitely do.
Thank you.
And then I think,
Just general concern about the topographical testing.
yeah, you had some more concerns about the topographical test.
Yeah, it's obviously the restriction, the topographical test and the time it takes and things to get swale licences and getting drivers through the topographical test has caused, I know, like I say, at least 2 firms on the island have plated and licensed drivers from up north.
Yeah.
Which I know there is a sort of grey area within the law on that one, that you can use a private hire vehicle from another area, but they've taken it that because they've even got, I think, a garage down here doing their testing. So Swale has no
We don't have enforcement powers.
No. So would possibly removing the topographical test that drivers are struggling to pass then bring the business back into Swale?
I mean, I think it wouldn't remove the test completely because there are other elements of the test that they would still need to set. I think we have looked at this before, and members did decide they didn't want it, which obviously is your prerogative to do so. The reason we're revisiting is because it was suggested by the DFT guidance to remove the topographical tests, and we've obviously felt because of those sort of safety risks that we didn't want to do it across the board for private hire, and because of sort of the move then towards private hire as opposed to Hackney. We've looked at the statistics for the street knowledge test, and that's part of the annual report which we'll be presenting, and we have worked really hard to increase the number of drivers that we are getting through the test because we listen to the feedback from the trade, and they do. And I sometimes think there's an element of it's that part of the test that causes people a problem. If we look at the test in a bit more in depth, a lot of drivers don't pass the highway code or the roadsides part of the test, or even the safeguarding, which we give them all the information beforehand. So I think it's a little bit misleading that it is that part, personally, that it is that part of the test that causes them the problem. But like I say, we've done a lot of work to give them the option of like having a partial test so that they don't have to come back and sit the whole test. They can just do that routes part so they can concentrate their sort of revision on that. And I think it's been really successful this year in particular. We've seen that increase. Problem we have is we're also seeing a lot of drivers leaving the trade because they're older, and so it's keeping, hopefully, the numbers steady.
No, thank you. It's just obviously I did read the report, and sort of it was just trying to work round. Obviously, I know. Obviously, we don't want the driver's licence somewhere else where we haven't got the control and the enforcement. And I know that was one, but like you say, it's not just the topographical part; it's the whole knowledge of everything else part. But
I think the whole county is seeing more this kind of licensed shopping, and not and sort of even within the county, like people going off to Canterbury or somewhere else, and you know, it's a difficult one to do anything about, really. Thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
In response to Councillor Moore's information there, just for a bit of notice, we did a taxi trial of electric vehicles back in 2018, and 50% of the drivers loved the idea and 50% moaned because of infrastructure, but that was back in 2018. But just for some figures for people now, which would be useful, for instance, I don't really know, but they're now offering super duper deals because of the carbon offset problems with manufacture. So it actually is now cheaper to buy an electric vehicle of the same spec than it is a diesel. So for instance, a Skoda will cost you roughly about £28,500, but with the discounts and deals, you'll get an EV3 for less than that. And most vehicles now, the average range is 240 miles, and the average taxi does 78 miles a day. So it's worth not giving in to when they go, oh, I haven't got that. And going back to the island, the Queenborough Road's got 9 chargers on it, and there are 22 on the island. But you have to go to ZapMap, and you have to obviously learn something new, which I think a lot of the drivers haven't done. But
the eastern end of the island has none.
Yeah, it's poor. They got 4.
Where?
Let's have a quick look. They are. There's one on the school car park. There's one on, yeah. Hold on, no, wrong place. Hold on. East Church, Laysdown. And then what was the supermarket that got planning that says you come into the island in the centre, and they're going to have 12. Could be, yeah. So they'll have 12. It's not on here yet, but there will be. But I think looking at the information that's come from ZapMap, the island should end up with about another 28 charge points. But it's just educating drivers really about all that sort of information. But for me, I'm probably a bit the other way with you, in that against the FEV side, I think we need to be careful about giving licences for FEVs, because what happens is, which is what we found when we hired, they don't bother plugging them in, and all they do is drive it around as a petrol, and then it's actually more polluting than if they'd gone and bought, you know, a very fuel efficient diesel or petrol. So yeah, for me, I'd say just BEVs and FCEVs, and then it would mean that they don't skip charging them, which, you know, everyone does naturally think, oh, I've got to make the effort, go and charge it, I won't bother, I'll just drive it around on petrol. So it then goes from 73 grams up to over 120. So I don't know, for me, I think for 2027, I understand what you're saying, for 2033, but for us, I think it's good. For me, I'd bring it forward, but I think that's probably not realistic. But they haven't got an excuse now, really. So I think people need to try and make a bit more effort. And the technology's there, the pricing's there, the range is there. So, yeah, I think it'd be interesting to see the feedback, and whether it's honest feedback from drivers or whether it's just, you know, oh, I can't find one, rather than that. So, because we had exactly the same problem with the lease vehicles. People would go, I can't find it, and it's because they didn't want to take the app. They didn't want to make the effort. But something I'd like to see is if the council put in a couple of super rapid chargers in the car park, and then made those accessible for taxi drivers, have your own RFID cards, then we would actually have some long-term income coming from that as well. But not that that's a licensing issue, but well worth looking at. So, but that's all I've got to say on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, for bringing me in. My apologies again for not being able to be in the chamber this evening. 2 things. Firstly, the topographical knowledge test. I have to take a different view to some of the other speakers. If I'm getting in a taxi or a private hire vehicle, I want to know that that driver knows their way around the borough. I want to know that that driver can take me by the shortest, most economical route that they possibly can, including the fact that if they come across a traffic jam, they know a shortcut round it, so that I'm not building up a massive, great big fare by the time I get to the end of my journey. So I would be against removing the topographical element of the test, it is a small number that actually go outside the borough, quite a small number of companies or drivers that go outside the borough to get their licence. So I think that should be kept in. And as for the EVs, I have to take a completely different view to Councillor Thompson, unfortunately. Having spoken to some of the taxi operators in and around Sittingbourne and the island, the electric vehicles as they are at the moment are over a third more expensive to purchase long term, and running them long term is more expensive than actually running a diesel, a fuel efficient diesel vehicle. And also the electric charging points are about, but there isn't enough of them. There isn't enough rapid chargers, and one of the complaints that I get from the industry is the fact that with the charging system we've got at the moment, they a lot of the time haven't got time to sit around for 2 hours waiting for their vehicle to charge if they've got long school runs or airport runs and that sort of thing. So my view would be that we need to take the requirement for buying electric vehicles or replacing all their current vehicles with electrics back to 2035, when diesel and petrol cars are supposed to be getting phased out. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Anything to say? Councillor Nundy.
Thank you, Chair. I am in agreement with Councillor Thompson on the electric vehicles because that's coming whether we like it or not, and I think it's important that the taxis in the area reflect that. It will be difficult, and I totally get Councillor Moore's point. There will be some serious problems on the island, and there will be some issues at the east end of the island. But when you actually look at like the way that electric cars are moving on and how far they can go, driving around the borough for a day, I think people probably would be okay. But I understand that it would be difficult for people to charge the cars overnight, and maybe that's something that we need to look at over the next 2 years and get that sorted within like the next 6 months to a year, so that when this does inevitably happen, we are sorted and we are ready for it. I'm still a bit confused about the topographical test. I don't understand why removing that would cause a... I don't understand the issue with the taxi drivers. I don't quite understand it. Could you explain that again, please?
It would only be removed. The DFT guidance only suggests removing it for private hire vehicles. So the Hackney vehicles that you can hire from the rank or the side of the road, they would still need to do the full street knowledge test with the topographical test. So our concern would be if we removed it for all private hire vehicles, that it would mean that we'd get more applicants wanting to sit just the private hire test, and then we'd get a shortage of the dual drivers who can drive the Hackney vehicles, cause issues then for the operators and also for the travelling public, because there wouldn't be enough vehicles available for immediate hire. Sorry, did I answer your question with that?
That completely, thank you. Just off the back of that then, now that I understand that a bit better, I think we probably should keep the topographical testing, because as Councillor Clark said, you want to know that your taxi driver knows the area well, particularly when we've got vulnerable people, that they need to know that we've got taxi drivers that are fit for purpose, know the area well, and know how to get somewhere quickly. Particularly when when we look at the vulnerable young women that are on nights out and stuff, because some parts of the borough are a bit rough. Sheerness has got quite a high crime rate. Sittingbourne High Street's got quite a high crime rate. I think it's really important, and I like the fact actually that in the report you actually mention the safety of women and girls in Swale particularly, and disabled people as well. I think that's really important. In terms of the spoiling fee, I don't think 85 quid, I think that should be a little bit higher. I'd actually propose maybe £100 because the cost of valeting has gone up, the cost of fuel has gone up, the cost of everything else has gone up, and if a driver ends up having someone that's just gone out and got themselves too drunk and they're throwing up and spewing up in the back of the taxi, they might not be able to get any work for the rest of the night. They might have to take the vehicle off the road. Then they're then not going to earn anything. So I think it needs to be just a little bit higher. I did have some concerns about that because I thought maybe like there could be an issue where a disabled person was in the back of a taxi and they soiled themselves through a disability. But I think in that respect, I think most taxi drivers would probably be quite understanding because they are fit and proper people. So I don't think there'd be an issue with upping it to £100 just to try and safeguard drivers to make sure that they're not losing too much money in today's world. So if anyone's happy to second that. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Chair.
I just wanted to make it clear that with regards to the topographical test, the proposal is that not to remove the topographical test for private hire badges in general, but to propose a restricted private hire badge, which would only be for school run contracts or some executive contracts where they have a particular contract that they go long distance journeys and that type of thing, which would be looked at on a case by case basis. Okay.
Councillor Winklis.
Councillor Jackson before me, Chair.
Gentlemen. Actually, my question's been asked by Councillor Clark and Councillor Nundy. I'd hate to think that this would all be passed on to the customer, and I am against dropping the pass mark because I think actually they need to know the shortcuts, etc., etc. And also, I wondered if the pass marks, the failures, are attributed to the new builds. Does that come into it at all? I noticed Sittingbourne has quite a low pass.
I don't believe it would be. I don't think those particular routes are, because they're quite recent and that we haven't made any. We've made amendments to the test, but not in the last of the routes, not in the last 2 years. So I wouldn't imagine that those are part of the test.
Councillor Winklis.
Thank you, Chair. I've taken on board really what the previous speakers have said. I'm actually going to be quoting 3.3.1, disability awareness of drivers, route knowledge, etc. I'm totally in favour of that. So we haven't got situations where we get reports of drivers taking long routes. So I think that's a good thing. And also 3.3.3 vehicle ages. I'm totally in agreement with not having this 10-year, well, I say this 10-year limit on the age. Perhaps I'm going to contradict myself slightly here. I think this came up before, and I would say possibly 10 years is too long for a vehicle to be roadworthy. I know they have to go through an MOT, but it does seem a long time. Would you come back and answer on that one?
Yes, they have their MOT. We also have they have to have a garage test that's specifically for a taxi vehicle, and we make sure that they have those. Once the vehicle is more than 5 years old, they have to do that every 6 months.
Councillor Martin.
I think we need to do the vote on the proposal first before we can do the other. So mine's on the main point, so I'll wait until we've done that.
Do the vote on the proposal. Was it for £100? Yeah.
Well, with the same wording, the up to between the driver company and the passenger.
Yeah.
Up to £100.
Yeah. Right. All those in favour of that proposal? Carried unanimously. Right.
Thanks, Chair. For me, I think it is about, actually this is one of the few policies that we do receive a good amount of correspondence on when we go out to consultation. So actually I think it's in a position where it's ready to go out. We can take the views of the trade and the public on board when it comes back to us and make any changes based upon that. Certainly I can see it from both sides in terms of charging, particularly when it comes to the island, because I think we struggled with getting them into our own car parks because of issues with substation capacities and not being able to upgrade those sufficiently. Equally, as Councillor Thompson said, there are an awful lot of deals out there that do make them cheaper now. It just depends on the manufacturer. The classic one would be if you taking a commercial vehicle, if you want a Ford Transit, you're going to pay, I think it's something like 3 times as much for the electric as you are for a diesel version. But if you're buying a Mercedes Sprinter, you're going to pay about £3,000 more for the diesel than you are for the EV. It really does depend on the manufacturer as to what you're going to get and what range you're going to get as well. I mean, some of them are now going up to 300 miles, and that's a real world 300, not a 300 in ideal conditions without your heating on in your radio. So it is possible, but we need that feedback to really see what's going to happen. We also need to see what happens with KCC's on-street EV chargers and where they go. Certainly I know we were begging for them to be on the taxi ranks in 2019 and again in 2020 and 21. I think we did it every year. So, hopefully we get some for the taxi ranks, but let's see. When it comes to the topographical side, again, I'll be led by what the trade's feedback is. My experience of other areas has generally been for private hire, doesn't make a huge difference because realistically, it's an A to B. You've booked it, they're going A to B. Most of them will whack ways on to try and get round if there is a traffic issue. The price is set for how far you're going. And actually, when they realise that they can't go to the taxi rank and pick up, all of a sudden they want to do their Hackney carriage licence because they're not getting the midnight trade out of the nightclubs and the pubs. So there's no real harm, but let's listen to the trade and go from there.
Thank you. Councillor Moore, we'll make this the last one, I think. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it was just really sort of similar to what Councillor Martin said, saying about... and I didn't realise about the map, and I'm quite happily just had a look at it. The 3 on the eastern end of the island are, one is in a hotel and 2 are in an 8-month holiday park. So again, yes, I know, we all know it's going to happen. Yes, something needs to happen because we can't have the diesel and petrol cars on the road. What I just wanted to make obviously aware of, and also some of the, especially if they're sort of owner operators, don't buy brand new cars. So we're looking at they're buying an older car, sort of second hand, which obviously is not as expensive as going out and buying a brand new electric vehicle. So I mean, it's great that we're all discussing this, and I think obviously it's preempting a lot of the, I think, with what everyone has said, it will come up, hopefully, in the consultation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a very useful debate and some good ideas there. There are 3 recommendations on the policy. Do I have a proposer? Thank you, Councillor Martin. Had a seconder? Councillor Winklis. Right. All those in favour, raise your hands. Carried unanimously. Thank you. Right. Right, item 7. Oh, yeah. Item 7, annual licensing update. Could I invite the officer to give us a report? Thank you.
Thank you. So, last February, in response to recommendations following an audit of our licensing functions, we presented our first annual report to Licensing Committee, giving a brief outline of the responsibilities and activities of the licensing team during 2023 and proposed work for 2024. The report presented to members this evening provides an update on our activities during 2024. Appendix 1 on page 151 of the agenda provides statistics on the current number of licences managed by the team and a comparison with the numbers for 2023. A particular success for the team, which I've already actually spoken about, was the development of a partial street knowledge test, allowing applicants who failed by small margins to reset only the sections of the test they failed. This has helped us to significantly increase the number of applicants we were able to accommodate and resulted in a substantial increase in passes. A year-on-year comparison of street knowledge test statistics is provided in detail on pages 152 and 153 of the agenda. Section 3 of the report on page 148 of the agenda presents our proposals for work we will be focusing on in 2025. A large part of this work will be led by the changes to the taxi policy and are dependent on the outcome of the consultation and members' decisions for that policy. The licensing team would welcome suggestions from members if there is any additional information they would like to see included in the report for 2025. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. I will open up the debate. Anyone wish to speak? Councillor Noy?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, yes, looking at actually the street knowledge test statistics there, the passes is quite an alarming number of fails. Is there any particular areas that you attribute to this, or any areas in which candidates have found it easy to pass?
The way the test works is that there are 8 sections, and candidates have to get 80% in most sections if they want a Hackney carriage badge, and 100% in the safeguarding part of the test. And it's 60% for the places and the topographical parts of the test if they want a private hire badge. The margins are very small in that there are 50 questions in the whole test, and they are so some sections only have like 5 or 6 questions in them. So it does mean that if drivers get like a few questions wrong, they can fail that section of the test, which is why we've so the fails, I think, sort of reflect the fact that drivers don't seem to come prepared to take a test, and the whole point of having this partial test is so that they can come back and do that section again without having to do the whole test again, which then has a bigger impact. So I think the number of fails, they are failing, a lot of them on the first attempt, but because they're coming back to do this partial test, I'm not being quite clear with what I'm saying.
If I could maybe clarify the question, just going
Sure.
back to what the sections are, we have, once again, the highway code, the local policy, so on and so on. Are certain sections of the test proving to be more challenging than others? Like, are we getting a lot of passes, for example, on the topographical areas, but a lot of failures in other areas?
No, I don't think so. There's a lot of people, when they fail on several sections of the test. So it's very rare for someone just to fail on the topographical element of the test. And like I said, we get a lot of drivers who fail on the highway code, which we wouldn't expect a professional driver to be failing on that, but they do. And the safeguarding element, because they have to get 100% in that part of the test, we often get drivers fail on that part and have to retake that part of the test. We do give them all the information on that section. We give them a PowerPoint that they can look at and revise, and yet they still seem to fail on that.
I'm trying to think how long ago it was now. It might have been over a year ago, if not a little bit longer ago. We found that we reviewed the safeguarding questions, the ones that we've developed in-house, and we did discover there were a couple that were a bit ambiguous because, again, they're multiple choice, so we did review them to make them clearer. So, I mean, Joe and I see the results of every street knowledge test, so we are able to pick out if there are any trends around which particular part of the test there are failures in. And as Joe said, actually, it is kind of across a lot of the topics, but if we do start to see a trend, we will look at it and think, oh, actually, is there anything else we can do to assist to get around whatever that particular barrier might be?
Okay, thank you. Yes, sorry, I'm a teacher, so I immediately go for this. Yeah, thanks.
I think a couple of years ago we did do more of a breakdown as to which sections of the test that they were failing on, and that's something we could look at again and look at it in more detail, but I'm pretty sure there hasn't been really a change on that, and it is pretty across the board, and like I say, a lot of them do fail on more than one section.
I'm familiar with students not coming prepared. So.
It's definitely the case that they don't come prepared. I think, and that's why a lot of them do seem to pass on the second one, because once they've been and done it once, it gives them a bit of an idea. And we have recently provided them with like an example of what each question will look like that gets sent out to them to try and help them get an idea of what they're going to have to do.
Councillor Clark.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just looking at these statistics on the report, I think I have to concur. I don't think it's a reflection of our knowledge test. I think it's a reflection, of the calibre of candidates we're getting coming forward, and the lack of preparation. If you're going for a driving test, whether it be for a motorbike, a car, a HGV or whatever, you wouldn't go into your hazard awareness test or your highway code test, I would hope, and also your practical, without having done your preparation for those tests, and done your driving lessons with a qualified instructor to take you through those. So yeah, I think it's more the candidates need to up their game rather than Swale having to change anything apart from if it's found that it is, as you say, ambiguous, in changing our knowledge test. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Oh, Councillor Moore.
I think I was just going to say it's nice to see that a lot of the applications are over the whole of the licensing, that you are still getting new premises licenses, personal licenses. I think it's a very good sign that in the borough that they are increasing in all. And the only other thing I was going to say, and I think it was answered, is maybe so people are more prepared to do a mock test. If we can provide a mock sort of test that they can go through. Sometimes it is that whole nerves of doing a test that maybe a mock might solve some of the way around it. But on whole, it looks like the licensing department, with the increase in things, is doing very well.
Thank you. I think it is something we've considered before, providing more example questions, and that's why we did give them this sort of one question for each section. We have to be very careful not to compromise the integrity of the test by giving out questions that are actually part of the test, so it would be quite a task to sort of write a lot of questions for a mock test, but it is something we could consider.
Thank you, everyone. Oh, Councillor Martin.
Thanks, Chair. I'll make it really brief. I think it's an excellent report, as ever. Good work from the licensing team. The only area where we're not seeing that increase is, of course, our sex establishments. We lost our one during COVID, and we still haven't had an applicant to take on another one. So perhaps we should refer that to the Economy and Property Committee to establish whether there is a need for such an establishment that might pay some revenue into our coffers. Beyond that, I think we should note the report.
Thank you. Yes, yes. Right. There is one recommendation. Do I have a proposer? Councillor Knorr, and a seconder? Councillor Nundy. All those in favour? Unanimously passed. Thank you. To the licensing team, thank you very much for your reports and all the hard work you do. Thank you. Thank you, members. I now close the meeting at 7:55. Longer than I thought.